I moved to the Bay Area about 7 years ago, or 5 years ago, and since then I've been, practicing polyamory, or exploring my queer side, and I'm fairly lucky and happy to have found wonderful people to do that exploration with, and this wasn't always the case in my life. About 7 years ago, I was on the East Coast. I was in medical school at George Washington, and I was pretty miserable. I didn't know that I was queer at the time. Like, I knew things were wrong and things were off inside me, but I didn't know what that was. And I just want to introduce a concept at this point. It's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, and it's the idea of concept-shaped holes in your view of the world. So just imagine, it's when we think about things in our mind, we have kind of shapes for different parts of the world. For me, I have like a shape for this is how cars work, and this is how computers work. And I know a little bit about some. And I also kind of know the things I don't know, right? I know what a catalytic converter does technically, but I don't know how that works. But I can like go out and find that, right? If I really needed to, I could do that. And there are other things though that we just don't have any conception for. And for me, being genderqueer, that was one of those things growing up. As when we're young children, we're always running around asking like, why, how? Because we don't know really anything. We're all new and everything's like amazing. Where do clouds come from? I don't know. Where does the sun go at night? I don't know. And we slowly start to build up these mental models of the world. And there's some things that we know through science and facts that we can figure out. And there's other things, though, that are more softer, that are like, how do we relate to people? What is love? How do we share parts of ourselves? What is possible for us to be? And these things we pick up with conversations with our parents, our friends, our family, the people around us. And I think we get into a habit of like being so certain about some things, we forget that not all of it is unquestionable. And growing up as an Indian kid, especially first generation. I was born in India, we moved to the States when I was 3 years old, and we lived in like North Dakota for a while. And it's a pretty different place from here. I don't know if any of you have been, but I remember learning how to ride my bike when I was young and being kind of worried, like, okay, I can go my driveway, but if I go a little bit further, what if I get lost? And I asked my dad, Dad, what happens if I get lost? And he just looks right at me and goes, everybody knows where you live. You just ask them. Everyone does. Yeah, part of it, we were the only brown family, but also, like, my dad was the only doctor for the whole town. And it was a small town, there was one stop sign, so, yeah, you knew where everybody was. It was like, our street was like the doctor, the person who owned the grocery store, the person who owned the bank. It's like, okay, everyone knows what it is. Yeah, so it was a very different place than what I was used to. So I grew up without really a conception of what it meant to be around even in community, because I didn't have a lot of that. And as I got a little bit older, we moved to Virginia, and there were more brown people around then, and my family got more Indian friends and more Indian family friends. And my younger siblings, they got to sort of grow up in that environment. But I didn't grow up with that. I sort of had been a little bit older by that point, and I knew that I wasn't brown, and I knew that I wasn't white, and I just didn't really have a sense of self. On top of that, I was really weird on the inside and queer, and I didn't know what that meant. I just knew that all the pieces of myself that I had didn't fit any of the puzzles that I was shown in the world. Like, I didn't fit the man box, or the woman box, or the straight box, or the gay box. Like, I was just all over the place, but I didn't know how to put it all together. I was just trying to fit all the pieces in. It didn't even occur to me to be like, maybe there's another puzzle that this piece belongs to. And I was like pretty well-behaved, well-intentioned kid. So like, I worked really hard, and I tried to, be a good son, go to medical school. Like, I didn't mind the work and the academic stuff. That stuff was really interesting, and it's cool to learn how the body works. But what was hard was the people that I was around. It's a pretty conservative profession. I don't know if anybody here works in it, but especially on the East Coast, in DC, a lot of people are government workers, and there's this sense of strong sense of what it means to be a professional, a strong sense of what it means to share in the workplace, and what is valued. Like, there wasn't a lot of value for self-care in that world. There wasn't a lot of value for actually taking your emotions seriously. It was just you come in, do the work, and go out. And that wasn't enough. I was too big to fit in that at the time, even without knowing that the career was there. So the longer I stayed in that world, I made it to, I did my undergraduate, I did my master's, and I made it to my second year of med school. And by the time I finished my second year, like it really felt like something inside me was dying, and I just didn't know what it was. And as a result, like I was not taking care of myself. I was really unhealthy with the way I was eating and exercising. Like I was really underweight. I was running a lot. It wasn't a good place. Luckily, like magically, one of the things that we were studying was human sexuality, and that teacher was really great and would try to like bring things to life as much as possible to show us that it's not just textbook, there are people behind it. And we had a panel on sex and gender, and we had people come who were transgender, who were non-binary, who were even like, it's weird to say this, but like brown and different. And that was a really big deal at the time. Like I grew up with all of the things that were different that I read about and I knew about, all the queer things I knew about were for white people. I never saw any brown representation of that, period. And I remember sitting sort of in the front row of that lecture and just being like, this exists, it's out there, like, things are real, like, it's not just the things that I've been reading. And that sort of like lit something within me, and I went home and I started to do the whole Tumblr and internet thing, more things. And I came across the term genderqueer, and I felt like my chest like sort of relaxed and I could breathe for the first time. Because there was a word for something I could be, and it wasn't just something I was making up, like other people were talking about it, and it was real. And to see that was amazing. And I remember standing in front of the mirror that night and like crying because I was all right. Like I knew that I could. There was something for me to be, and that was good. Yeah, so that was a few years ago. And what eventually culminated that, plus just what I wanted to be, culminated in me leaving med school, deciding to quit, and spent a little bit of time sort of floundering, figuring out what to do. Freaked out a lot because when you're at a crossroads where you're like, okay, throwing out my entire life's plan is a less destructive option, it's kind of ridiculous. And eventually I decided to kind of study tech because I always loved like math and science things. And I knew some people in the Bay Area, and I got an internship here, so I drove cross country and just I taught myself programming, got a job, and I've been doing that for a while. At the same time, that's when I started exploring my queerness. I mean, like, so on the East Coast, I found the word and I was like, oh, this is what I am. But the people around me had stayed the same. Like, the context of where I was had stayed the same, so I didn't really get to explore it. And when I got here, that's when I first got to do it. I got to date as a queer. I got to go out and, like, try on the label and like, change the way I looked and change the way that I talked. And I'm so grateful for how open everybody is about this stuff in the Bay Area, and that meant so much. And little by little, I started accepting queerness as part of my identity, and like felt less and less like an imposter as time went on. And it wasn't just through my personal one-on-one experience with the media; it was also through the synthesis of that media with the people that I was with. I think sharing what was around me, that's really what helped amplify that representation and really helped amplify the emotions that I was getting. And validating them, really. Like you can watch a thing and have a thought, but saying it out loud and getting that reflected back, that does so much more. That's that next step. I remember going on a date with my partner Jen, and we went to go watch Milk at the New Parkway. I'd been around in San Francisco long enough to like recognize things in the film and know the places, and we sat upstairs. I don't know if any of you have been to the Parkway, but they had like theater and food areas. So we sat upstairs and we just sort of like cried and ate really tasty food. And it was like a wonderfully queer day. We were just sitting there talking about our feelings, but having emotions at this film, and then also having those emotions validated that you are allowed to feel these things. And what you're saying is important, like that was huge. And I kept having experiences like that the longer I dated. Yeah. what happened next to, or what kept happening was those kinds of stories. And I started to become more and more comfortable with being queer. But there's another kind of word in the beginning, which is like the Indian. And I didn't have a lot of that. I didn't know how to integrate that part of my identity with the queerness. And the Bay Area was the first place where I found other brown people, and they accepted me, and that let me see myself as brown and not just kind of like a broken American walking around. Because that's what it felt like. I didn't know what I was. I knew I wasn't American, but having other brown people see me as brown and finding POC spaces and feeling like I belonged, that was amazing. And again, like sharing media with my partner Lena, who's also brown, and we got to synthesize together what was happening and say, oh, your queer experience is similar to my queer experience, even though we're from different places, we're not from here, but we can still share, we can still grow together. That was really significant for me. And yeah, I think if anything that I want to talk about, or that I want to get across, is that like talking about who you are will help you find other people who see you that way, and it will help them feel seen too. And that was pretty amazing. Does anybody here watch Bollywood movies? Yeah. So there's a movie called Kushi Gabhi Gum, which is like really intense on the family drama scale. It's really good. And if you get a chance to watch it, go watch it and then talk to your Indian friends about it, because they'll be really excited. But I remember, like, during this time having lots of, difficulty with my parents. As you can imagine, they weren't really pleased with the things that were happening in my life and my desire to change. They were super supportive. I mean, they never, for a minute, let me feel like I wasn't accepted by them. I was so lucky and grateful for that. But they are still struggling with all of it. And I was trying to explain the intensity of family drama, and words weren't doing it justice. But sharing this piece of media that someone had put, work and art and intention behind, that let me get the emotion across in a way that I couldn't with my words. And after sharing that, they're like, oh, I understand how much you mean, why it feels so intense when you talk to your parents like this. And we've been since trying to consume more and more non-Western media for that purpose of like, let's look at things from a different emotional lens. And can we get different insights into the world because of that? That was really cool. And listen. Oh, it's Kabhi Khushi, Kabhi Gum. Yeah, I don't know how to spell it. It's with Shah Rukh Khan. He's like, think about it. He's the highest paid actor in the world. Like, glad you all appreciate that. What was I talking about? Oh yeah, sharing things and going from there. And trying to integrate my brown personality with my Indian personality, that has been a really strange journey, and I'm still working on it. But being able to step away from it, come here and explore and grow, and then step back into it at my own pace has been really helpful. And by sharing that media, it's doing two really interesting things. One, it's kind of implicitly asserting ownership, saying like, this is actually something for me, like this is something that represents me, and so I'm reaffirming my brownness while doing that, which is a really nice way of being able to say like I am brown without having to say it out loud. And the second thing is, a lot of what was painful about my culture growing up, because it represented all that struggling I did while I was in school that I didn't want to be studying, all these things, I got to re-experience it with like excitement and joy with the people I loved, and they got to reflect that back at me. And I got to have a corrective emotional experience where this thing that was painful for me was now really joyful. And thank you to my partner for that term. Like, if you ever get a chance to date psych professionals, please do. It's awesome. It's great. I learned a lot of things. Words for new concepts that you didn't know. That's been really great. So I've been having a lot of these corrective emotional experiences, and it's still struggling with taking ownership over that role. And I was talking to Jen about this and was saying, I know that I'm queer and I know that I'm Indian, but I don't see any Indian queers out there. Like, I don't know what it means to be this. I don't know what it means means to embody this or what I'm supposed to do. And she just looks at me and she just goes, Sahil, you're Indian, you're queer. So anything you do is what Indian queers do. God damn it. Yes, you're right. Just really matter of fact. She's great. Yeah, so that's part of me being up here for myself is trying to like accept that and trying to be loud about it. At least try to be visible about it because I am that, and so I might as well just be that if it makes me happy. And so I thank you all for letting me be up here. Okay. So the other thing I wanted to talk about sort of is polyamory, which I really haven't mentioned much except for passing. But there's another metaphor I use to look at all of this stuff. And I think about all the stories and the experiences that we share as a community, like not just us, but anywhere, the communities that share it. And I think about all the untold stories and the views of who we are as a people. I think of that as a tapestry that is weaved together, and each of these threads is something that we hold important. And I think society in general has that. So like, Americans believe this about ourselves. These are the things that we value. These are the things that we find important. For example, like monogamy is a big one in general American culture. Like that's really important. Family is really important. Nationalism is really important, etc. Like every single group has those things. And it's different from we're building the same kind of patterns in ourselves. And I feel a lot of dissonance when the tapestry that I feel on the inside is different from the one I feel around me. And that's part of why places like these, spaces like these feel so good, is because we have a lot of shared stories within us in the tapestry that's holding us as really similar, and we feel like warm and held. At least that's how I imagine it for myself. And the difficult part of like figuring out that I was queer was that all of a sudden a lot of my tapestry changed. And I tried to find new ones. I tried to read more things. I tried to search and find more people that had that. And I found a lot more, which is great. Like being here was awesome. And I think that the lesbian and gay community, they're starting to accumulate like a history of stories, and that builds it together. And I think that the non-binary and the other subgroups, they're still working on that, which is awesome. Like we're in the phase of we're building that tapestry out. And with polyamory, that's actually honestly where I feel that thing is most threadbare. I don't have a lot of stories to represent who I am as a poly person. Like the experiences I'm having with my chosen family, I can't point to a piece of media and say, it's kind of like that, like watch this and it'll give you the same feeling that I'm having. And that is something I miss a lot, or I'm feeling the absence of a lot. It would be great to have a movie that showed like a good representation of a poly family that I could show my parents. Hey, this is what it is. It's not something weird. It's just like, we're trying to figure out who's doing laundry and getting dishes, and like it's just more people. Because right now, like a lot of wonderful stuff is happening for me personally in my poly family. There's a new baby in the mix. She's really cute. She's like almost 2 months old, and like the sweetest little thing. And I'm involved in a really weird way. Like one of my partners donated an egg to another one of my partners so that she and her partner could have the baby. So I'm not like genetically involved at all, but I'm really emotionally involved, and this kid means something to me, and I mean something to her, but I don't have a word for what that is. I don't have a concept that I can share with people. And I would really like that, so I'm hoping we can learn more things together to make that. Yeah, and I think mostly just, I wanted to say to people, please talk about your stories if you can. Like I'm pretty lucky. I know I'm privileged that I could be out at work as being poly, and I don't have to worry about my health and my safety. And not everyone gets that privilege. I understand that. And so I try to speak up when I can. I try to go to schools and do panels and talk to kids and just be a source of information. And I'm really grateful and lucky that I get to be here today. And yeah, so thank you all for listening. That's mostly my story. There's another thing too, like, I didn't know that you could be in the circus if you were Indian. Turns out you can. And I'm working on that. I'm mostly supposed to be a programmer, but mostly I do this nowadays. Yeah. I think, is there any questions? Thoughts? Oh, yeah. Yeah, thanks. Thank you for asking. For me, being poly means being able to approach people one-on-one in a way that feels fulfilling. I like the term ethical non-monogamy because it's weird because you sort of have to fight against the preconceived notions of what it means to like multiple people. And so saying ethical non-monogamy lets people know that, okay, it's a type of relationship where everyone sort of knows what's going on. And it started out for me as that, as a way to like, I know that I like more than one person at a time. And can I explore that in my dating life? And it began as that, but it sort of evolved into let me start questioning my preconceived notions of what it means to have relationships, what it means to have friendships, like what lines I draw around the different kinds of relationships. And the result of it has been that I can have, for me, it feels like I'm allowed to have deep connections with individuals, and I can share that connection with other people in my life without having to be worried that I'm hurting other people by them. And I think that's what polyamory sort of means mostly to me is a new way of interacting with people. And even if I go on in the future to be only dating one person or not be dating anybody at a time, I would not feel any less polyamorous because how I look at people and how I love people, that's what's changed.
I love your story of finding that one of the concepts of the whole now are more, what are your current today? What are your concept shaped goals now?
What are my unknown unknowns?
Yeah.
I don't know. By definition don't know, but yeah, that's a good point.
What do you think?
Let me think. Actually, so I think for me, one of them is I grew up having a very strong sense of career and having a strong sense of you needed kind of one path in life. Like in 4th grade, I went to my teacher because I got a B on a test and I said, hey, can I do some makeup credit because I don't want this to affect my chance of getting into med school. So I'd known for a pretty long time. And when I finally quit that, I sort of jumped into another career. Like I didn't take the time to figure out how else to be alive. I jumped into tech and I started going up that ladder. And I recently quit my job in July, and I've been really hard, trying not to get another job and just seeing what else is possible. And I think that's a big concept shaped hole for me is how do you live in a capitalist society without a salaried income and without a career path? Is that even possible? I think it is. I have some really cool friends who are older and are doing stuff like that. I don't know if I'm allowed to or if I can. And that's my biggest one right now. I'm working on it. Yeah, thank you.
Have you found any answers to that question? That's your biggest,
The concept-shaped holes.
What have you learned so far in that process?
What I've learned so far is that I'm fortunate to have saved up money because things keep costing stuff. That keeps happening. And also getting healthcare sucks if you don't have a job. I still don't have it. I'm trying to figure it out. I think what I've learned is that you have to have some level believe in yourself and believe that, have a little bit of faith that on the other side of your work, there's going to be some reward. And I'm trying to restructure the way I look at things. Instead of thinking about, will this path make me successful? Will this action lead me to success? Instead being does this action feel fulfilling right now? And if I keep following that feeling of feeling fulfilling right now and saying yes to the opportunities that come up, I think that will lead me to somewhere that I'm happy with. Yeah. And that's what led me here. I had a chance to be here and I just said yes, and I was really scared and I really want to get an A+ in this talk. That's what I felt. So I'm just trying to have courage that if I have faith in myself, then maybe it'll be okay in the end. Yeah. Yes.
I just wanted to thank you for talking. Really enjoyed it, and I feel like the personalness of it is a lot of what it's about for all of us. We had struggles and we share them, and it's
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, I feel I was telling my partner, I would love to have just this conversation one-on-one with everybody, because like there's the other half, there's your experience too. Like, but yeah, you're welcome. Thank you.
So, it's fine if this is too big a question, but I feel like you spoke about the process of integrating your Indianness with your queerness. Can you give kind of what's the state of the art on that for you?
Thank you. Yeah, it's going well. What I realized when I started this part of my journey was that my conception of what it meant to be Indian was really limited to how my family was and what my personal experience with it was, and the culture itself is way bigger than that. And I had been sort of like, not brainwashed, but I had a lot of like the Western imperial influence over my thoughts around it, where anything that was cool or awesome or like liberal was a white thing and not a brown thing, and trying to like undo that training in my head, which is part of why like consuming more non-Western media has been a part of that. And in that process, I found some really cool things where like I'm really into like hip hop and rap. That's like my newest kind of music that I like, and I just found out that there's a whole genre of that coming out of Mumbai in India called gully rap, and there's a whole movie about it, and it's like a whole set of like people who are doing that, and it's not an imitation; it's their own example of it. They're talking about where they're from, the same kind of struggles, and like I'm finding resonances in that way. And so I think my goal right now has just been to like keep looking for the things that I value in myself in other Indian people, and then like bridging the gap that way. That's sort of where I'm at.
Did it help to experience what it was around?
Yeah, it did. Well, it's because it's like one of those things where people in general are like really good at giving advice and not really taking advice. And so like seeing other brown queers and like affirming their queerness and talking about their experiences, like, yeah, you're awesome, you're doing that. Of course you're allowed to be that way. And then they'll just be like, but you too, right? Fine. You must. I feel like I just get trapped into affirming myself really from the people I'm around a lot lately. Yeah, so that's been a big part of like talking about that. It's a great trap, yeah. Like I can't really be mad about it, just play mad. Yeah, that's about it. Yeah, I think that's the time. So
Thank you.
thank you. Oh, you're welcome. Okay, I'll juggle for a minute if people want that.
You can't have them there and then not.
It's juggle. Okay. I'm not a magician. Yeah. I'll try to be careful, but I'm not a magician, so you see these coming towards you. They are? My favorite word. People can be funny first. I don't have an accurate. Especially kids. You should spend the first like 5 minutes just having them throw things onto the floor. You just gotta get over that stigma, like most of it is just keeping them. You know, so cool story, I'm colorblind. I had someone else pick out these things and they were like, they look good, trust me. And these glasses, just anything.
What color is this?
Kind of red, kind of blue. I don't know which one. Pink or red.
Five colors.
Yeah, that's what I call it. Lights are red. Lights are super confusing.
Oh my gosh, is the community
Oh yeah, yeah. I just stand in the corner and let people talk. Did you all have fun yesterday?
Oh, yeah.
And today's gonna be great too.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm really glad that I could
You ended a little bit early, so if you want to, if anybody still has questions for Sahil, we can do that. Also, something you said really landed for me, and I wanted to share with you. So you mentioned what happens when you don't have a job, you're unemployed. What can you do at that time, and what can you create? And I just want to say that I'm unemployed, except for the fact that I'm raising a 3.5-year-old and managing a house and a home and everything else. But I have been spending my time planning BiCon. So this is happening because I took a leap and I'm not going back to work doing the thing I was doing before, and I'm like trying to figure out what I can do with my abilities and how I can help people, and showing more representation and visibility and advocacy for the bike and pan community has been what I've been doing. So it just really feels amazing to see everyone here and benefiting from it. And this is exactly the change you can make in the world if you don't have a job and you spend your time doing something else. So I feel very privileged for that. And any more questions for Sahil? Really, we have a few more minutes, and we could pick your brain. Here we go. Here's a question.
So about intersectionality within oneself.
Yes.
Having a lot of different identities, they sometimes feel like you're leaving bits of yourself behind in order to get into spaces like here I'm this, there I'm that. You're going to be like me and like struggling to know and.
Yeah, that's a good question. I do have that, yeah, but especially when I go home and visit my parents, or I go home and visit my high school friends, or when I'm here in different spaces. I think I've just tried to come to peace with the fact that I'm way bigger than one space. Like I can't be all of me all the time, and just because I'm not showing a certain part of myself at a given moment doesn't mean I don't have it. That's been really great. It's like I got a lot of shirts. I only wear some at a time, and maybe that's okay. And sometimes I go out of my way to just be like extra assertive about who I am in some spaces if I really feel like I need to that day. And some days I'm okay with just kind of like blending in, and I take it on a case by case. But yeah, it's a big thing. And I found a really interesting thing that like as I'm evolving in my identity, I'm like picking up and putting down different pieces. So like with my queerness, I started off, I was super masculine because I was playing the part, and then I was like, no masked things ever. And then as I got like more and more comfortable with understanding that part of myself, I was like, well, actually, I like facial hair, so I'm going to take that back. And like, I like talking about some sports with some dudes, so I'll take that back sometimes. And like, being able to approach things as a this is what I want today and not what I have to do forever, that's been really helpful. Because you're constantly changing, and it's not a bad thing. So not, okay, cool. Yeah, so I hope that answers the question. Yeah, there's one more. Oh yeah, thank you. And the question was, in my Indian culture, in my background, are people becoming more acceptable of my queerness and my something else in general? In India specifically, yeah. I think so. Yeah, so the question is it becoming more acceptable in India? And I think the answer to that is yes. They just recently passed a law where like gay marriage is allowed, which was a really big thing. Like being acknowledged as a thing in law was really great. Now that being said, India is a really big place, and they're like the sub-communities within it are really strong, and it's still not a safe place to be different, but it is starting and it is changing. Yeah, it is better now than it was before. From what I know, yeah. But there's still a lot of work left on that front for it to go. Okay, great. Thank you.